So I'm speaking with the great John Ottman, who has composed so many iconic scores over the years and has proved his versatility with scores like The Usual Suspects, At Pupil, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, X2, and a personal favorite of mine is Lake Placid, and is now reteaming with Bryan Singer.
What is it with you guys in Lake Placid? Okay, go ahead.
I love Lake Placid. I don't know. It's just such a good score. Anyway, he's reteaming with Bryan Singer on Jack the Giant Slayer, where he is the composer, editor, and associate producer. Thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Sure. Well, we can have a Lake Placid conversation some other time.
Okay. Now I know you have a long history with Bryan and the Bad Hat Harry team, going all the way back to college. But what initially made you want to pursue film composition, and when did that itch for editing kind of come into the picture?
Well, the itch for editing never came into the picture. It was just something I fell into because I was making films at USC, and I was editing my own pictures, and then people took notice that I guess I was editing my films really well, so they asked me to edit their films. And in film school you just do whatever. And my philosophy is always do. Just do whatever people want you to do, because the more things you do, the more things will pop. So I would just do stuff, and then I got roped into editing Bryan's first feature, and then, as the story goes, the composer dropped out in the last minute, and I was there having had done it as a hobby, so I scored the film and realized, wow, I'd much rather do this. So then on The Usual Suspects, I said, well, I just want to score the movie, and he's like, hell no, you're going to edit it also. So that blackmail continues to this day. So to answer your question, I'd much rather score movies because, and I lose a lot of work doing these editorial sagas because I'm out of my career for 2 years as a composer. So,
right.
I got one big score out of Jack, but it was one, not like four.
And you've worked with Bryan on all his films except the first X-Men, because you were making your own film, Urban Legends: The Final Cut. But what's your favorite part about working with him, and what keeps you coming back over time and time again?
Well, he does big budget movies, so it's the carrot he dangles in front of me. Might as well, if you want to score this movie, you got to edit it. So my agent jokes, says Tim Burton make Danny Elfman wash his car so that he can score the film. But anyway, it's in terms of working with Bryan, when you work with someone for a long time, there's a shorthand and there's a trust, and so that always makes me feel more comfortable working for someone who I have a long track record with. And he, he's a little old school, which is great. So in other words, I could present a synthesized mock-up. It doesn't have to sound, perfectly amazing, even though they sound pretty good. He understands that when I tell him something's going to sound better live, and he just trusts that, so that takes some pressure off.
All right. And not many composers, wear more than one hat during a film like you do with Bryan, and I know a few who write the scores and the screenplays, but never the score and editing. For your process, what comes first? Does the editing come first, or does the scoring come first?
No, of course the editing. I'm nowhere near in the mindset of writing the score, except just worrying about it when I'm cutting the film, because it's an all-encompassing thing to cut the film. And at some point I have to tell everyone, look, I got to start writing the score. I'm going to be up shit creek. So at some point I make a transition and I begin writing, and that's the very difficult part for me because I'm still managing the film as the editor. And and at that point when I'm starting to write the score, it's when all the problems are coming forward. The studio's watching the film, all the politics are happening, test screenings, all the actors have to be ADR'd. Countless meetings, visual effects are coming home to roost, and it's just it's mind hemorrhage. And so I put an Avid in my editing console in my bedroom, and supervising stuff in the editing room. Then I run downstairs and write, and it's just a crazy time for me.
It sounds ridiculous. I don't know how you funnel it all down, but
that's why no one does this. It doesn't make any sense to put a human being through such horrible torture.
Oh my! Well, when Bryan tells you about his next film, and you're going to be the composer and the editor, when you're reading the script, is your mind thinking musically, or are you kind of thinking from an editing standpoint during that point?
Well, first of all, as soon as he calls me and tells me that there's some project, I'm full of dread because it's too close. I mean, now, normally it takes him a couple of years to put one of these things together, so I have a couple of years to A, decompress, and B, go and score some movies. And our next one came a lot sooner than we had anticipated. So I'll be going off to do X-Men in just a few weeks, and I just I can't even imagine going right back into the situation. But I forgot what was your question again?
When you're reading the script, like when Bryan first tells you.
What am I thinking about the music?
Are you thinking musically or editing?
I'm thinking both. I mean, honestly, the first thing I'm thinking about is editorially, like how much of a challenge it's going to be. And I remember being in the plane reading Valkyrie, which was touted to be just a simple little caper that we were going to make. And I'm reading the script, and I broke out in a cold sweat because I realized, well, the script is just a bunch of old men talking in rooms. How is this going to become a caper? This is going to be really hard to pull off, and this is not going to be the simple little movie he's talking about. So I start thinking about trying to have some sort of clairvoyance ahead of time, knowing what the challenges are going to be editorially, and of course in the back of my mind is what kind of score this might be. For Valkyrie, I was thinking, oh well, this will be a movie with hardly any score. It'd be awesome if I could just pull it off with sound effects and stuff, which actually was my goal, to make it more raw, and realistic by not having it be a real score kind of movie. As it was, I designed the score to be sort of buried under a lot of the sound effects because I wanted all the typewriters in the rooms and the machines and all that kind of stuff. But I'm diverging now, but yeah. So it's basically just how am I going to make the film first, and the score is just sort of I guess sort of a latent thing in the back of my head that I'm thinking about.
And I know a lot of composers, when I talk to them, they always complain about temp tracks in the cuts of the film. And when you edit, do you use music at all in your editing process, be it your music or anybody else's music?
At first, no. I construct the entire film dry, and I like to watch the film and have it exist with no score whatsoever, which is a really interesting thing because when in my opinion, when editors cut to music, they're using the music to perhaps mask problems the scene has that it's covering up. And I would rather, if the scene can exist by itself, then I'm really, or if there's problems, I'm not going to use the music to solve the problem yet. And so when I've got the entire cut together, then I spend about 2 weeks temping it. And I do this kick-ass job temping it, and it becomes the temp score becomes my worst enemy. So it's like, or I become my own worst enemy by creating such a great temp score. So, and it's weird. It's like on Jack, our post schedule dragged on because we had to change our release date, and so the temp score, as brilliant as it was, everyone loved it. It starts getting old, and people start getting sick of it. So that works in my favor, because then I could write something, and anything I write is just going to be new and something they haven't heard before because they're so over it, So, but it's tough when you're on a fast release schedule or a short post, and you create a great temp, and it's so new and fresh to everyone. They just all they can think about is that temp score,
So yeah, you mentioned because the movie did get pushed back from last summer, and how does that give you like a breath of relief, or do you go, oh crap, I'm gonna have to redo a lot of things, and it's going to play with my mind, and like, do you see it as more time to finish something, or do you see it as more of a curse to be given more time?
I think it's more of a curse. I mean, I think a movie kind of could lose its way too if there's no release date, because we didn't have a release date for a while to figure out when to reschedule it. And because the effect shots did so much more work, and I just and then that's sort of a bad place for a film, because then the tinkering and the endless second thoughts of second thinking everything can happen, and so I'd rather just be that there be a finish date, and that's the goal, and no matter how hellish it is, it's going to be over. But yeah, I mean, extra time is always a good thing. But I had actually written the score for Jack months before we released the film and started tinkering. So we, even scenes were rearranged and so forth, and I had to edit the music to accommodate the new cut. I mean, we were prepared to go back and re-record with some pickup dates and things, but I was managed to make it work in Pro Tools through the magic of digital editing. So if there's any real geek out there who wants to watch the movie and analyze that versed upon the CD they get, they're gonna have a huge dissertation on how cues were rearranged and reused and pitched different keys and all sorts of stuff. So.
Well, and I saw the film last night, and it was so much fun. I enjoyed it so much, and it was
Okay.
so, I mean, just kind of old school adventure, with, mixed with kind of fairy tale aspects, and but the visual effects are amazing, and the motion capture and all that, and there's so much of it. And so, when you're as the editor, at what stage are you working kind of on the previs sequences, and then the effects guys finish it up, or?
No, this was enough to give me a brain hemorrhage on a daily basis, because from the very beginning we have, first of all, we motion captured all the actors, which is simply them in those suits everyone sees,
right?
With the dots in their face, and it's just data. That's all it is. It's just computer information, and you can do anything you want with that. And that was left to me, surprisingly. So I sort of would take the data and create the shots for the giants. Like, okay, I want the shot to start on a giant's feet and come around its back and rise over his head and reveal the little people walking in front of him. Well, when I lens, it's called lensing shots. When I lens these shots, I would place those in a sequence, and then I had to storyboard the surrounding shots that we hadn't shot yet with the regular actors, and each of those storyboards would dictate how much set we had to build, which became a war between the production designer and the visual effects team about how much is going to be a real set, how much is going to be a fake set, and then that storyboard sequence is sent to the set, and they're supposed to shoot with the storyboard. But then, of course, they go off the track. Then I get something back. It doesn't work with the shots I've lensed. Then I have to reconceive the shots, and it goes back and forth, back and forth. So it was really extremely complicated. And, as you say, that it's like the film is a really simple story and a simple movie, and you look at it, and you have no idea what it takes just to pull off one of those giant shots.
I know, yeah.
And each of the shots is like a year-long project.
Wow.
That you have to manage, because it's a long time of development every time you come up with the shot once it's decided upon.
The logistics sound like a nightmare.
I can't even tell you. I've never been. It was. I mean, to be honest, I almost quit a couple of times because I couldn't take the pressure. It was because I'm trying to. There's a bucket of film dumping in on every day for the regular scenes that I have to cut together, because everyone wants to know if they can tear down a set, so they need to know if the scene's working, if they got the shots. And then on top of that, though, I'm in 5 hours in visual effects meeting trying to design shots to storyboard scenes that we need to go shoot, and it was insane. Insane.
Well, the work, I think, paid off, and I think the finished product definitely speaks for itself. So that's it's a good job, a great job.
Thanks. Well, I hope so. It's just it's just a simple adventure, like you said. So it's like all this agony for just a simple adventure movie. It's like, we'll see.
Well, the score was huge too, and I loved it. And right from the opening logos, you were already bringing us right into this world. What was the goal musically for this film?
I hate to keep overusing the word adventure movie, but it's this good old-fashioned adventure without being cliche, fairy tale, flourishes and stuff, because that would just make it too gay, And I think that once you start doing that stuff, you dismiss it, and from moment one, Bryan and I want everyone to know that, despite the fact this is some lighthearted movie, you have to take the world that you're creating seriously.
Right.
And I think the music has to be very serious in what it's trying to convey. And I guess the line that I had to ride, which I've mentioned in my liner notes on the CD, was like, making it as weighty as possible without making it a downer, and so also keeping it fun. So
right.
It's keeping it popcorn without being stupid.
Right. And I mean, I loved how you would kind of score certain action beats and kind of give it an old-fashioned, I guess, corn gold or kind of bounce to it. And the one that always stood out to me was when Jack was standing on that step and it breaks, and you kind of, when he falls, you hit that drop with the music. I mean, I don't really have a question. I'm just kind of making an observation, but I really liked it.
Yeah, well, these movies, it's all about hitting everything to keep it interesting and fun, and so it's really, and I tend to do that anyways. I tend to be a guy who likes to hit a lot of things, with the timings of the music. But I mean, that's just old-fashioned film scoring, I guess.
All right, and we created a great theme too. This kind of big, kind of heroic, and it really gave the film a weight that I really embraced. So it was really cool.
Oh, thanks. I didn't come up with that theme till way late in the process, which has never happened to me before.
Oh, really?
It was agonizing to write the score, and I just couldn't come up with a theme for Jack. And because the original idea was to have the love theme be the predominant theme in the film and carry both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And because I love a score where you just hear the same theme over and over, a la John Barry or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was the idea, just to use the love theme purely as the theme. And as I was scoring the film, I was like, no, it's like, what am I, crazy? It's like every time there's a scene with Jack, even though it's with Isabel, I feel like it should be coming from his point of view. But I had never invested the time to write a theme for him, because I just kind of dismissed it in my head. I guess it was kind of like being lazy too. So late in the process, I stumbled across it, and then I'm like, holy shit, I've got to have to go back and re-infuse his theme everywhere. And of course, most of all that stuff had already been orchestrated, and had to open up the can of worms for all these different cues.
Mm-hmm. So I know you're probably not allowed to say anything, but Days of Future Past, you're going to be scoring that, correct?
Most likely, yeah.
Right.
I've got my editing deal closed, but they're still haggling on the other thing. But
so you would be the first composer to actually return to the franchise, which is actually very interesting, because every film has had a different composer.
Yeah, that has pissed me off big time. I mean, because I'm a real big stickler on film music continuity on a film series. And it's just been awful how it's just been, there's no continuity among any of those movies at all.
I know.
And everyone knows I was really upset when we didn't do X-Men 3, because I had planted all of these thematic seeds for the characters I wanted to expand upon in X-Men 3. And then when we didn't do it, I mean, all that work was abandoned. And so in a way, I sort of like have something to prove going back to this X-Men franchise, and in my mind resurrect a lot of that stuff. But I really don't know if that's even going to happen, because I know Bryan wants to really do the whole, like, there's something different he wants to do. He hasn't really told me yet. So I was singing my X-Men 2 theme to him, and he looked at me and he's like, well, we got to talk about that. I'm like, what? So I don't know what that means, but all that matters is I'm going to be temping it, and whatever I tempt with that works, they usually fall in love with. So I'll try to get that theme in there if it makes sense for this movie. It just depends on the context of the film,
Yeah, well, I mean, I totally agree with you on everything about. That's why I enjoy the Dark Knight series so much, because Hans kind of stayed through. But all these other superhero franchises, they love to switch them up a lot, and kind of ruins the identity of the characters as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so religious about it. When I saw Spider-Man, I was really expecting it to be a big orchestral version of the animated series theme. It was like, I wanted to hear bum ba-dum, bum ba-dum, something, some bombastic version of that. And so I was like, what? Or even when the Wild Wild West came out years ago, I wanted to hear that theme. So
right.
I'm really, diehard about continuity.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm very interested to see what comes out of that. Very excited about Days of Future Past.
Yeah, it's like a rock score or something.
Well, Henry Jackman kind of did that.
Metallica kind of score. I was kidding.
Well, I guess to wrap...
God help me if that's the idea.
Well, I'm sure you'll make it work, even if that is the idea. But to wrap up, I always like to ask composers this one question. If you could score any film ever made with no disrespect to the original composer, which film would you choose?
Oh, man. Well, that's hard, because the ones I would choose already had great scores on them.
Well, that's the point. What film?
Oh, well, who wouldn't want to score Dances with Wolves or Out of Africa or something, where you're given like long vista shots to sort of sink your teeth into and do a piece of music that actually goes somewhere. So yeah. I mean, that would be my, I think we're all looking for the next Dances with Wolves or something like that.
Yeah, beautiful score, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like almost sacrilegious to say that, since the music was so perfect in the film.
Right. Well, that's a good answer. I love the anser. And I guess
I'm sure there's some film out there, I can't think off the top of my head now, where the score sucked, and I wish I had scored it, but I can't remember. Actually, some are coming to mind now, but I can't mention them because they're too recent.
Yeah, I don't want to make any enemies. But I guess let me add a little one more to that question. If you could edit with any director other than Bryan, of course, who would you like to edit for?
Oh, Spielberg, hands down.
Spielberg? Great.
Yeah, well, because he's an idol, a directorial idol. I just think he's whatever you think of some recent movies, the fact is the guy's the real deal. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a genius filmmaker.
Absolutely, yeah.
Maybe Cameron, but he's a control freak. He actually does a lot of the editing himself, so he might drive me crazy.
Well, hopefully you won't be driven too crazy on the next project, but all your work definitely paid off, and congratulations on it. It's a great piece of work, and thank you so much for your time today. It was such a blast to talk to you, John.
Oh, thanks. You too. All right, thanks a lot.